Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a really big one, the Industrial Relations Code of 2020, which completely changed the game for Indian labor law. All right, so let's jump right in. The huge question here is why? Why would India decide to overhaul labor laws that have been on the books, in some cases, for nearly a century? So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll talk about this big labor law reboot. Then, we'll get into who's who at work under these new definitions. After that, we'll look at unions, the new rules for conflicts, and we'll wrap it all up with the code's main goal. Let's get into it. All right, first things first. To really get what this new code is all about, you've got to understand the problem it was created to fix. You know, for decades and decades, if you were running a business or working in one, you were dealing with this messy tangle of different laws. There were three major ones, and they often overlapped, sometimes even contradicted each other. It was, frankly, a bit of a mess. And just look at this timeline for a second. It's kind of wild, right? We're talking about a law from 1926, from the colonial era. These were the rules still governing a 21st century economy. So what this new code does is basically sweep all of that history into one single modern rulebook. And that really was the whole mission, in their own words, to amalgamate, simplify, and subsume. Basically, take those three old acts, mash them together, clean up all the confusing bits, and create one single, straightforward framework. That was the idea. Okay, so before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the rules, we have to get our terms straight. The code is super specific with its language, and believe me, these definitions, they're what give it its teeth. Stop. What exactly counts as an industry? Well, the definition they use is really, really broad. It's basically any organized activity where people are making, supplying, or distributing stuff. The only major things left out are, charities or core government functions like national defense. Okay, now this is a really important one. The difference between a worker and an employee. Think of it like this. All workers are employees, but not all employees are workers. If you're a manager or a supervisor making more than a certain amount, you're an employee, sure, but you don't count as a worker under the code. And why does that matter? Oh, it matters a lot. It determines who can join a union and who gets certain protections in disputes. And here's another huge change, something that really modernizes things. The code officially creates a category for fixed-term employment, what most of us would just call contract work. The cool part is, it says these workers have to get the same pay and benefits as permanent folks, just calculated for their time. And get this, they're even eligible for a gratuity payment after just 1 year on the job. All right, so that brings us to the next piece of the puzzle, unions and collective bargaining. This is really the heart and soul of industrial relations. So let's see what's changed. So how do you start a union now? Well, the code makes it pretty clear-cut. You need at least 7 people to get the ball rolling. But to be officially recognized, that union has to represent at least 10% of the workers, or 100 people, whichever number is smaller. So it's a numbers game. Now, this is a real game changer. Let's say a factory has a few different unions. Under the new code, if one of them can show it has the support of more than half the workers, 51%, it becomes the one and only negotiating body for everyone. The whole idea is to stop the confusion of having multiple voices and just create one direct line between the workers and management. Okay, now we're getting into the really high-stakes stuff. The rules that kick in when there's conflict. We're talking strikes, layoffs, and even closing down a business. And this is a huge one. Before, the rules for when you had to give notice for a strike were all over the place. Now, it's simple and it's for everyone. Any industrial business, any group of workers, you have to give 60 days notice before a strike or a lockout. That's a 2-month cooling-off period, built right in to give everyone time to talk it out before things grind to a halt. This is another big shift in numbers. It used to be that if a company had 100 or more workers, it needed permission from the government to do layoffs or shut down. They've tripled that threshold to 300. The logic here is to give smaller and medium-sized businesses more freedom to adapt and restructure without getting bogged down in bureaucracy. But what about workers who are laid off for a short time? Maybe because of a power outage or a machine breaking down. The code sets up a specific safety net for them. They're entitled to half their basic pay, plus something called a dearness allowance, which is basically an adjustment for cost of living, for the whole time they're unable to work. And then there's this, which is brand new for Indian labor law, a special fund designed specifically to help workers who've lost their jobs get back on their feet. So, How does it work? It's actually pretty straightforward. For every single worker that's let go, the employer has to put the equivalent of 15 days of that worker's salary into this fund. Then, within 45 days, that money goes straight into the worker's account. It's like a financial cushion, giving them some breathing room to retrain and find a new job.
Okay, so when you step back and look at all these different pieces, the simpler laws, the new definitions, the new rules for unions and disputes, what's the big picture here? What's the ultimate goal?
Really, the code is trying to do two things at once. It's walking a tightrope. On one side, it's trying to smooth things out between employers and employees to keep the peace. But on the other side, it's trying to cut through the red tape to make it easier to run a business and help industry grow. And that, right there, is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Can this new code actually pull it off? Can it successfully balance the need for business growth with protecting the rights of workers in one of the biggest economies on the planet? The true test, of course, will be seeing how all of this plays out in the real world. And that's really the most important thing to watch.